The day my father called me a disgrace wasn't the worst day of my life. The worst day came 6 months later, when a lawyer slid a faded envelope across a polished oak desk and quietly said, "Your father wanted you to know the truth before anyone else." Inside that envelope was a secret capable of destroying everything my family had spent 30 years pretending was real. But to understand why that envelope changed my life forever, you first need to know why my own father hated me. People always assume a father naturally loves his children. I used to believe that too. Growing up, I chased my father's approval the way some children chase butterflies. No matter how hard I reached, I never caught it. My name is Daniel Carter. I was the youngest of 2 children. My older brother, Michael, was everything my father admired. Confident, athletic, outgoing. He could do no wrong. If Michael scored 90 on a test, Dad celebrated. If I scored 100, he simply asked, "Where's the extra credit?" At first I thought he was just trying to push me toward excellence. But as I grew older, I realized something painful. Nothing I ever did would be enough. When I was 12, I won first place in the state science fair. I remember running into the house holding the trophy so tightly my hands hurt. "Dad, I won." He barely looked up from the newspaper. "That's nice." Just 2 words. That's nice. Meanwhile, when Michael made the junior baseball team despite spending most of the season on the bench, Dad invited the whole family out for dinner. That was the first time I understood there were different rules for different children. Mom noticed. She always noticed. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, she sat beside me on the porch. "You know your father loves you." I forced a smile. "If he does. He has a strange way of showing it." She didn't answer. She simply hugged me. Looking back now, I think she knew far more than she was willing to admit. As the years passed, I stopped trying to impress him. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because disappointment becomes exhausting after repeating itself hundreds of times. I graduated near the top of my college class. Michael dropped out after 2 semesters. Dad called Michael a free spirit. He called me book smart but useless. I accepted a modest job as a financial analyst. Nothing glamorous. Just honest work. Michael bounced from business idea to business idea. Every failure somehow became someone else's fault. Yet Dad continued writing him checks. When I asked for nothing, Dad said I lacked ambition. When Michael demanded everything, Dad admired his confidence. It never made sense. Then Mom became sick. Very sick. The diagnosis came so suddenly it felt impossible. Advanced heart disease. She needed constant care. Michael visited twice during the first month. Then he stopped coming altogether. He always had excuses. Business meetings. Travel. Friends. Emergencies. The truth? Taking care of someone offered him nothing in return. So he disappeared. I didn't. Every morning before work, I stopped by my parents' house. I cooked breakfast. Picked up prescriptions. Drove Mom to appointments. Spent evenings reading beside her hospital bed. Some nights I slept in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, because she was afraid of being alone. Dad rarely thanked me. Instead he'd criticize everything. "The soup's too salty. You were 10 minutes late. You should have called first." I swallowed every insult because Mom needed peace more than I needed pride. One evening, while helping her into bed, she squeezed my hand. "Promise me something. Anything. No matter what happens. Don't let bitterness become your home." I laughed softly. "That's easy for you to say." She smiled through tired eyes. "No. It's harder than you think." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Months later, those words would become the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Mom passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning. The house became unbearably quiet. For the first time in my life, I realized she had been the bridge holding our broken family together. Without her, everything started collapsing. Michael suddenly returned. He handled funeral arrangements as though he had been there every day. He accepted sympathy from relatives. He cried loudly whenever someone was watching, then checked his phone the moment they looked away. I said nothing, because grief leaves little energy for arguments. During the reception after the funeral, I overheard my aunt whisper to another relative, "Daniel did everything for Margaret. It's a shame Robert never appreciated him." I froze. Dad had heard them too. His jaw tightened. He slowly turned toward me. There was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not sadness. Not gratitude. Something colder. Almost. Resentment. I couldn't understand why. Not then. But looking back, that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment my father decided I would no longer be treated like his son. I just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks after my mother's funeral, my father called me for the first time. His voice was as cold as ever. "Be here Sunday at 6. "For what?" "A family dinner." He hung up before I could ask another question. I stared at my phone for several seconds. For years, my father had never invited me to dinner unless there was a reason. And somehow, I already had a bad feeling. Sunday evening arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging over the neighborhood. As I pulled into the driveway of the house where I'd grown up, memories came rushing back. Learning to ride my bike. Helping Mom plant flowers every spring. Watching Christmas lights sparkle through the living room window. For a brief moment, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, Dad wanted to start over. Maybe losing Mom had changed him. Maybe he finally realized how much time we had wasted. I was wrong. Very wrong. The front door opened before I even knocked. Michael stood there wearing an expensive suit, and the same confident smile he always wore when he thought he had already won. "Hey, little brother." His fake friendliness made my stomach tighten. "You actually came." "I was invited." He chuckled. "Of course you were." There was something strange about the way he said it. Something almost amused. As I stepped inside, I noticed the dining room was already full. My Aunt Linda, Uncle George, 2 cousins, my father's business attorney, even a family friend who had known us for over 20 years. This wasn't a family dinner. It was an audience. Dad entered the room a moment later. He looked older than I remembered. Mom's death had clearly taken a toll on him. His shoulders drooped slightly. His hair seemed grayer, but the expression on his face remained unchanged. Emotionless. "Sit down," he said. "No greeting. No handshake. No hug. Just an order." Dinner began in complete silence. Knives scraped against plates. Glasses clinked softly. No one seemed comfortable. It felt less like a meal, and more like everyone was waiting for something. Then Dad folded his napkin, cleared his throat, and looked directly at me. "I've made a decision." The room instantly fell silent. "I've updated my will." I blinked. No one had mentioned a will before. Dad continued. "My lawyer finalized everything yesterday." The attorney sitting beside him quietly nodded. My father looked around the table before returning his eyes to me. "As of today, Daniel receives nothing." For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard him. Nothing? I waited for someone to laugh, to explain it was some strange misunderstanding. No one did. Instead, Michael slowly leaned back in his chair. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Dad's voice grew louder. "You have embarrassed this family for years. I worked my entire life to build something meaningful. And you," he pointed directly at me, "are a disgrace." The word echoed through the dining room. Disgrace. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt as though the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. I searched every face around the table. My aunt looked down. My uncle stared at his hands. Even the family friend avoided looking at me. No one defended me. Not one person. I finally found my voice. "What exactly have I done?" Dad laughed bitterly. "You still don't understand? I sacrificed everything for this family. You've done nothing but disappoint me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I took care of Mom. I was there every single day. I never asked you for anything. His face hardened. "Don't you dare use your mother to make yourself look noble." Those words hit harder than I expected. Because they weren't just unfair. They were cruel. Michael finally spoke. "Dad's only doing what he thinks is best." I slowly turned toward him. "You've barely been here for years. You don't get to talk about what's best." His smile disappeared. I've been building my future. No. Quietly. You've been spending Dad's money. The room became painfully tense. Michael pushed his chair back. You've always been jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous? Of what? Being the favorite. Watching someone earn love they never bothered to deserve. For years I'd convinced myself I wasn't angry. But sitting there, listening to him rewrite reality, I realized anger had been waiting inside me all along. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. He stood up. This discussion is over. My decision is final. You are no longer part of my legacy. The word stung. Not because of the money. I honestly didn't care about the inheritance. It was what those words meant. He wasn't removing me from a document. He was removing me from the family. I slowly stood. My chair scraped across the hardwood floor. I looked at everyone one last time. No one stopped me. No one said, wait. No one said, this isn't right. I realized something heartbreaking. Sometimes people don't betray you by hurting you. Sometimes they betray you by saying absolutely nothing. As I reached the front door, I heard my father's voice one final time. If you walk out, don't ever come back. I stopped. For just a second. Part of me wanted to turn around. To argue. To beg him to explain why he hated me so much. Instead, I remembered something Mom once told me. Some doors only close so better ones can finally open. Without looking back, I opened the front door. The cold evening air hit my face. I walked to my car, closed the door, and for the first time since I was a little boy, I allowed myself to cry. I cried for my mother, for the father I wished I'd had, for the family I'd just lost. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The house grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. The first few mornings after that dinner felt strangely quiet. For years, my life had revolved around my parents' house. Checking on Mom, running errands, trying, sometimes desperately, to earn a kind word from my father. Now there was nowhere to go. No one waiting for me. No reason to drive across town. I woke up every morning, reached for my phone out of habit, and then remembered. There would be no messages, no calls, no family, just silence. It turns out silence can be louder than shouting. People often think losing a family happens all at once. It doesn't. It happens in small moments. The first holiday spent alone. The first birthday with no phone call. The first Sunday afternoon when you realize no one even wonders where you are. Each moment takes another tiny piece of your heart. Until one day, you realize you're carrying around a heart full of empty rooms. 3 weeks after my father disowned me, I changed my phone number. Not because anyone was calling, but because I was tired of hoping they would. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom. Old wooden floors that creaked every time I walked across them. A tiny balcony overlooking a busy street. But for the first time in years, everything inside belonged to me. No criticism. No shouting. No impossible expectations. Just peace. At first, peace felt unfamiliar. Then it slowly became addictive. Work became my escape. I arrived early every morning and stayed later than everyone else. Numbers were predictable. People weren't. Spreadsheets didn't lie. Families sometimes did. One afternoon my manager, Sarah, stopped by my desk. You've been working 12-hour days. I've fine. She crossed her arms. No. You're hiding. I looked away. She wasn't wrong. After a long silence, she asked softly, want to grab coffee after work? Normally I would have said no. But something about the kindness in her voice reminded me of Mom. So I agreed. That small coffee shop became part of my weekly routine. Every Friday after work, Sarah and I talked for hours. Sometimes about work. Sometimes about books. Sometimes about nothing at all. She never asked uncomfortable questions. She never pushed. She simply listened. One evening she finally asked, what happened to your family? I stared into my coffee. My father decided I wasn't worth keeping. She remained quiet. Then she smiled sadly. You know, Sometimes the people who reject us tell us more about themselves than they do about us. Those words stayed with me. For weeks, maybe even months. Life slowly began improving. I started jogging every morning. I cooked instead of ordering takeout. I smiled more. I laughed occasionally. Not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because I had stopped waiting for someone else's approval before allowing myself to be happy. It was a strange feeling. Freedom. I hadn't realized how heavy disappointment had become until I finally put it down. Then one afternoon, everything changed again. I was leaving the grocery store when I heard someone call my name. Daniel. I turned around. It was Mrs. Patterson, my parents' next-door neighbor. She had lived beside us for nearly 25 years. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, Daniel. It's so good to see you." We talked for a few minutes. Then her smile faded. "I wasn't sure whether I should tell you." My stomach tightened. "Tell me what?" She hesitated. "Your father's health hasn't been very good." I froze. "What happened?" She sighed. "He collapsed about a month ago. The doctors say stress has been hard on him." I looked away. Part of me felt concerned. Another part reminded me of his final words. "Don't ever come back." Mrs. Patterson gently touched my arm. "He asks about you sometimes." I looked at her in disbelief. "He does." She nodded. "But only when he thinks no one can hear." That sentence echoed in my mind all night. If he asked about me, why hadn't he called? Why hadn't he apologized? Why hadn't he tried to fix what he'd broken? Questions without answers are dangerous. They keep you awake. A few days later, my cousin Emily unexpectedly called. We hadn't spoken since the night of the dinner. "Daniel, I know you probably don't want to hear from me." "What is it?" She lowered her voice. "Something's wrong." "With Dad?" "No. With your father." I stayed silent. She continued. "Michael has practically moved into the house. So, he's making your father sign paperwork almost every week." I frowned. "What kind of paperwork?" "I don't know. But every time I visit, the lawyer is there." "The same lawyer?" "No. A different one." That caught my attention immediately. My father's attorney had handled everything for decades. Why would Michael suddenly bring in someone new? Emily sounded nervous. I have a bad feeling." "So do I admitted. "But it's not my problem anymore." There was a long silence. Before hanging up, she whispered, "I hope you're right." Weeks turned into months. Summer slowly gave way to autumn. Leaves covered the sidewalks outside my apartment. Life settled into a routine. I honestly believed my past was finally behind me. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, my office phone rang. The number wasn't saved. I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. "Hello." A calm, professional voice spoke. "May I speak with Mr. Daniel Carter?" "This is Daniel." "My name is Jonathan Reeves. I'm an attorney." Immediately, my heart began racing. "I represent your father." Every painful memory came rushing back. "I think you've called the wrong person." "No, Mr. Carter. I've called exactly the right person." There was a pause. Then he said 7 words. Words that would change my life forever. "Your father has been hiding something from you." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What are you talking about?" "I can't discuss it over the phone." "Then why call me?" His next sentence sent a chill through my entire body. "Because someone inside your family is trying very hard to make sure you never learn the truth." I stopped breathing. "What truth?" The lawyer spoke quietly, almost as if he feared someone else might be listening. "Mr. Carter, before your father changed his will, he left you something far more valuable than money." And at that exact moment, I realized the story my family had forced me to believe was only half the truth. I didn't sleep that night. No matter how many times I replayed the lawyer's words in my head, they refused to make sense. Someone inside your family is trying very hard to make sure you never learn the truth. Who? Michael? My father? Someone else? And what could possibly be more valuable than an inheritance? The questions followed me until sunrise. The next morning, I called the number back. Jonathan Reeves answered immediately, almost as though he'd been expecting me. Mr. Carter. I'll come. I thought you might. When? Today. 1 o'clock. My office. I'll text you the address. Before hanging up, he added one more sentence. And Daniel. Please don't tell anyone you're meeting me. The line went dead. That request made my heart beat even faster. At exactly 1 o'clock, I parked outside a quiet brick building downtown. Unlike the large law firms I'd seen in movies, this office looked almost forgotten. A small brass plaque beside the door simply read, Jonathan Reeves, attorney at law. Inside, everything smelled of old books and polished wood. A receptionist smiled politely. Mr. Carter? Yes. Mr. Reeves is expecting you. She led me down a narrow hallway lined with shelves full of faded legal files. When I entered his office, Jonathan Reeves stood to shake my hand. He looked to be in his late 60s. Gray hair, thin glasses, a calm expression that suggested he'd spent decades listening to people's secrets. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. He nodded. I wouldn't have blamed you. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he walked to a large filing cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and removed a thick brown folder. It wasn't new. The edges were worn. The corners were bent. Someone had opened it many times over the years. Jonathan gently placed it on the desk between us. What is this? He looked directly into my eyes. This file has remained hidden for 28 years. I frowned. 28. Yes. Long before your mother became ill. Long before? My pulse quickened. What does it have to do with me? He rested both hands on the folder. Everything. I instinctively reached for it. He stopped me. Not yet. There are things you need to understand first. I leaned back, trying to stay patient. Your father hired me 3 months ago. 3 months. I thought he already had a lawyer. He did. But after discovering certain information, he wanted someone completely independent. That immediately caught my attention. What information? Jonathan sighed. The kind that destroys families. He slowly opened the folder. Inside were dozens of papers, photographs, letters, medical documents, bank records. Some pages looked decades old. Others appeared recent. At the very top lay a sealed white envelope. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were 6 words. For Daniel. Only Daniel. My breath caught. I recognized that handwriting instantly. It was my father's. The same handwriting I'd seen every birthday card, every permission slip, every grocery list Mom had asked him to write. For the first time in years, my father had written my name. I can read it. Jonathan shook his head. Not today. I stared at him. What? Your father gave me very specific instructions. You may read that letter. Only after you understand why he wrote it. Frustration filled my voice. You're asking me to be patient after everything that's happened? I'm asking you to hear the truth in the right order. Jonathan removed an old photograph from the folder. It showed my parents standing outside a small hospital. My mother looked young, beautiful. She was holding a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. My father stood beside her, smiling. I'd never seen him smile like that before. It almost didn't look like the man I knew. Jonathan slid the picture toward me. Do you recognize this? Of course. It's the day I was born. He quietly shook his head. No. I looked again. Then back at him. What do you mean no? Look carefully. I studied the picture. The date printed in the corner. The hospital. The blanket. Everything seemed normal. I don't understand. Jonathan spoke softly. That baby isn't you. Every muscle in my body froze. What? You heard me. I laughed nervously. That's impossible. He didn't laugh. He simply reached back into the folder and removed another photograph. This one had been taken just 2 days later. Same hospital. Same parents. Different baby. I felt the room begin to spin. What is this? Jonathan answered quietly. That's the question your father spent nearly 30 years trying to answer. I pushed both photographs away. No. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. My parents would have told me. Jonathan lowered his eyes. Your mother wanted to. The room suddenly felt too small. What are you saying? He took a deep breath. I'm saying that the story you've believed your entire life was built on a lie. My hands started trembling. Who lied? He hesitated. I can't prove intention. But someone inside your family made sure certain hospital records disappeared. Disappeared. Yes. And because of those missing records, your father spent decades believing something that wasn't true. I could barely speak. What did he believe? Jonathan looked at me with genuine sympathy. He believed that your mother had betrayed him. The words hit me like a freight train. My mother? The woman who spent every day protecting our family? No. She would never. I know. Jonathan interrupted gently. And that's exactly why you're here. He opened another section of the file. Inside were official hospital documents. Some original, some recently recovered, each stamped with dates from nearly 30 years earlier. He carefully placed them on the desk. 6 months ago, a retired nurse contacted your father. I frowned. A nurse? She was dying. And before she passed away, she confessed that something happened in the maternity ward the night you were born. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. What happened? Jonathan closed the folder. His expression turned grave. Mr. Carter, if what this nurse confessed is true, then everything your father believed about your birth, everything that destroyed your family, began with a single decision made inside that hospital. I stared at the folder in complete silence. For years, I had believed my father hated me simply because I could never earn his love. But now, for the first time, I began to wonder if he had been living under a terrible lie all along. And deep inside, I realized I was no longer afraid of learning the truth. I was afraid of what it might cost. For nearly a full minute, I couldn't speak. I simply stared at the stack of hospital records spread across Jonathan Reeves' desk. The room was silent except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt heavier than the last. Finally, I forced the words out. What exactly did the nurse confess? Jonathan took a slow breath before answering. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. She worked in the maternity ward the night you were born. 6 months ago, after being diagnosed with terminal cancer, she contacted your father. I frowned. Why wait almost 30 years? Because guilt doesn't always arrive immediately. Sometimes it spends decades waiting for courage. He opened another envelope and carefully removed a handwritten statement. The paper was old. The ink had faded. But every word was still perfectly readable. Jonathan adjusted his glasses. This is her signed confession. He looked at me. I'll read only the important parts. My hands tightened around the chair. He began reading. On the night of October 18th, there was chaos in the maternity ward. A power failure caused several emergency procedures to happen at once. During the confusion, identification bracelets were accidentally switched between 2 newborn boys. My heart skipped. Jonathan continued. The mistake was discovered only a few hours later. Before we could correct the records, the hospital administrator ordered us to remain silent because he feared lawsuits that would destroy the hospital. I stared at him. What? Jonathan nodded sadly. The hospital covered up the mistake. But I grew up with my parents. I wasn't switched. No, you weren't. He turned another page. The babies were returned to the correct mothers before discharge. I let out a shaky breath. So nothing changed. Jonathan looked at me. Except one thing. He slid another document across the desk. A laboratory report. Old. Yellow with age. What is this? Your father's blood test. I looked closer. Then at another paper beside it. My mother's medical report. Jonathan quietly said. Back then, hospitals routinely performed blood typing on newborn families. I didn't understand. So, He gently tapped the reports. According to the blood types recorded that night, the doctors mistakenly concluded that your father could not biologically be your father. I felt the air leave my lungs. No. Jonathan nodded. Those results belong to the other baby's family. I blinked. Then blinked again. My mind refused to process it. So, my father spent years believing that mom had cheated on him? Jonathan answered softly, yes. And because the hospital never admitted the mix-up, he believed that lie for nearly 3 decades. I stood up so quickly the chair nearly fell backward. No. There has to be more. If Dad believed I wasn't his son, why didn't he divorce Mom? Why stay? Jonathan looked toward the window. Because he loved her. The answer surprised me. He loved her so deeply that he convinced himself to live with the pain instead of losing her. I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw my father differently, not as a monster, but as a man carrying a wound he believed was real, a wound that poisoned every year afterward. Still, one question haunted me. If he believed that, why hate me? Jonathan looked directly at me. Because every time he looked at you, he saw what he believed was proof of your mother's betrayal. Those words hurt more than anything I had ever heard. Not because they justified his cruelty, but because they explained it. Jonathan reached into the folder again. This isn't all. He handed me another envelope. This one had been opened before. Inside was a DNA test. Modern. Recently completed. I looked at the results. Probability of paternity. 99.9999%. My hands started shaking. My father is my biological father. Jonathan smiled sadly. Without any doubt. Tears blurred my vision. 30 years. 30 years of distance. 30 years of criticism. 30 years of trying to earn love that had been buried beneath a lie. All because of a hospital's mistake. But if Dad learned the truth, why didn't he tell me? Jonathan's expression changed. He tried. What? He came to your apartment. I frowned. When? The week after he changed his will. I was home every day. Jonathan slowly shook his head. You had already moved. I remembered. I had changed my number. Moved across town. Started over. He couldn't find me? No. He asked relatives. No one knew where you lived. A painful realization settled over me. While I believed my father wanted nothing to do with me, he had actually been searching for me. Jonathan opened the final section of the folder. There is something else. My stomach tightened again. What now? He removed several bank statements, property deeds, investment papers. I frowned. I don't understand. Jonathan smiled slightly. The will your family heard at dinner was never your father's final will. I stared at him. What? The document read that night was intentionally incomplete. I felt my pulse quicken. Why would he do that? Jonathan folded his hands. Because after discovering the truth, your father no longer trusted everyone sitting at that dinner table. My mind immediately went to one person. Michael. Jonathan didn't answer. Instead, he quietly pushed a photograph toward me. It showed Michael standing outside this very law office. The picture had been taken only 2 weeks earlier. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him was the new attorney Emily had mentioned. Jonathan spoke in a calm voice. Your brother has been trying very hard to gain control of everything your father owns. I looked closer at the photograph. Michael wasn't smiling. He looked nervous, almost frightened. Then Jonathan said something that made my blood run cold. Daniel, I don't believe your brother knows the truth about your birth. But I do believe he knows someone who spent years making sure your father would never discover it. The room fell completely silent. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a story about a father's regret. It was beginning to look like someone had hidden the truth on purpose. And if that was true, my family's tragedy hadn't been caused by a simple mistake. It had been protected by someone's silence for nearly 30 years. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Michael stood outside Jonathan Reeves' office with another attorney I'd never seen before. The timestamp in the corner showed it had been taken just 12 days earlier. I looked up. Who took this? Jonathan folded his hands. A private investigator. You hired someone to follow my brother? No. Your father did. Those words caught me off guard. My father. Jonathan nodded. After the retired nurse came forward, your father began questioning everything. He couldn't understand how one hospital mistake had remained hidden for nearly 30 years. So he started looking deeper. I swallowed hard. And what did he find? Jonathan's expression grew serious. He found evidence that someone wasn't just hiding the truth. Someone was actively protecting the lie. Jonathan reached into the folder one last time. This time he removed a small flash drive. He placed it carefully on the desk between us. What's on it? A conversation. Between who? Michael. And attorney Victor Lang. I frowned. The new lawyer? Yes. My pulse quickened. What kind of conversation? Jonathan hesitated. One they didn't know had been recorded. He inserted the flash drive into his computer. A crackling audio file began to play. The voices were faint at first. Then they became clear. Michael. I'd recognize his voice anywhere. How much longer do we have? Another man answered. Not long. Your father is asking too many questions. Michael sounded irritated. Then keep him distracted. The lawyer lowered his voice. If he changes the estate documents again, everything falls apart. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Jonathan paused the recording. There's more. He pressed play again. Michael sighed. Daniel can never come back. The lawyer replied. As long as he stays away, you're safe. Michael laughed quietly. Trust me. After what Dad said to him. He'll never come back. The recording ended. Silence filled the office. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Michael hadn't simply accepted my father's decision. He had counted on it. But I struggled to find the words. That doesn't prove he knew about the hospital. Jonathan agreed. It doesn't. It proves something else. What? That your brother wanted you completely removed from your father's life. I leaned back in my chair. For years I had assumed Michael simply enjoyed being the favorite. Now it looked like he had something much bigger to protect. Jonathan handed me another document. It was a financial report. Large withdrawals. Property transfers. Investment accounts being emptied. Every signature belonged to my father. When were these signed? Over the past 4 months. But Dad was sick. Exactly. A cold feeling settled over me. Are you saying Michael manipulated him? Jonathan chose his words carefully. I'm saying your father signed complex legal documents while under heavy medication. I looked closer. Some signatures barely resembled my father's handwriting. Others looked rushed. Almost forced. I need to see him. Jonathan looked relieved. I hoped you'd say that. He deserves to know I know the truth. Jonathan's smile faded. There's one problem. What? Your father doesn't know where he is. I blinked. What do you mean? He disappeared 3 days ago. Every muscle in my body tensed. Disappeared. Jonathan nodded. The house is empty. His phone is off. No one claims to know where he went. My voice became louder. Michael. He says your father wanted privacy. And you believe him? No. Neither do I. Within an hour we were driving toward my childhood home. The closer we got, the faster my heart beat. Nothing had changed outside. The same oak tree. The same white fence. The same porch where Mom used to wave goodbye every morning. But something felt wrong. The curtains were closed. The mailbox overflowed with letters. The front lawn hadn't been cut in weeks. It didn't look like someone was living there. It looked abandoned. Jonathan knocked. No answer. Again. Nothing. Just as we turned to leave, an elderly voice called out from across the street. Daniel. I turned. Mrs. Patterson. Our old neighbor. She hurried toward us. I thought that was you. I smiled weakly. It's been a while. She looked around nervously before lowering her voice. You need to be careful. My heart skipped. Why? She glanced toward my parents' house. I saw your brother arguing with your father 3 nights ago. What happened? They were screaming. I couldn't hear every word, but I clearly heard your father yell. You lied to me for years. My blood froze. Mrs. Patterson continued. Then your brother shouted back. It's too late to change anything now. Jonathan and I exchanged a quick look. Neither of us spoke. Mrs. Patterson's hands trembled slightly. I haven't seen your father since that night. Jonathan immediately called the private investigator. 20 minutes later, we met him at a nearby cafe. His name was Richard. He spread several photographs across the table. Your father visited 3 places before disappearing. A hospital. This law office. And he hesitated. And what? A storage facility. I frowned. A storage unit? Richard nodded. He rented it 26 years ago. He's kept paying for it every month. I looked at Jonathan. Did you know about this? He slowly shook his head. No. Richard slid a small key across the table. We recovered this from your father's office. The storage manager confirmed it belongs to Unit 317. I picked up the key. It felt surprisingly heavy in my hand, almost as though it carried the weight of decades. What could possibly be inside? Richard looked at me. I don't know. But whatever it is, your father protected it for over 25 years. Jonathan stood. We're going. I looked down at the tiny silver key resting in my palm. For years, I had believed my father kept nothing of mine. Now I was holding the key to a secret he had guarded for half my life. And somehow, deep inside, I already knew that whatever waited inside Unit 317 would finally explain why my father spent 30 years loving me, while convincing himself he had to hate me. The storage facility sat on the edge of the city, hidden behind a row of abandoned warehouses. It wasn't the kind of place people visited unless they had something they desperately wanted to keep, or desperately wanted to forget. Jonathan parked the car. Neither of us spoke. I looked down at the small silver key still resting in my hand. For 26 years, my father had paid to keep whatever was inside Unit 317 hidden from the world. The question was, why? The manager recognized Jonathan immediately. Mr. Reeves, I've been expecting you. He looked at me before adding quietly, and you must be Daniel. I frowned. You know who I am? He nodded. Your father came here every year. Every single year. He'd unlock the unit, stand inside for about 10 minutes, then leave without taking anything. A chill ran through me. He never removed a single box. Never. The manager unlocked the main gate. Unit 317 is at the end. The hallway smelled of dust and old concrete. Rows of identical gray doors stretched endlessly in both directions. Finally, we stopped in front of one marked 317. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. The lock clicked. For a second, I couldn't move. Jonathan gently nodded. Whenever you're ready. I slowly rolled the metal door upward. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. Inside, there wasn't much. One wooden table, 3 cardboard boxes, a faded rocking chair, and dozens of photo albums stacked neatly against the wall. That was all. No fortune. No hidden gold. Just memories. I stepped inside first. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight. The room felt frozen in time. Almost sacred. On the table sat a small envelope. Across the front, written in my father's handwriting, were 4 simple words. For my son. Not. For Daniel. Not. For whoever finds this. Just. For my son. My eyes instantly filled with tears. For the first time in my entire life, my father had called me his son. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The date at the top shocked me. April 12th, 26 years ago. I began reading aloud. If you're reading this, then I finally found the courage I never had. Today I watched you take your first steps across our living room. You laughed when you fell. You reached for me. And for one brief second, I forgot every doubt that had poisoned my heart. I picked you up. You wrapped your tiny hand around my finger. And you smiled. No child could fake that smile. No father could forget it. I stopped reading. My voice had cracked. Jonathan quietly looked away, giving me privacy. I wiped my eyes and continued. People tell me you're not mine. The doctors tell me the blood tests don't lie. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. But every time I hear you laugh, my heart chooses you anyway. If one day you discover this letter, I hope you'll forgive a weak man who allowed doubt to become stronger than love. I couldn't continue. The tears came faster than I could stop them. For years, I had believed my father never loved me. Now I realized something even more tragic. He had loved me every single day. He simply never trusted his own heart. Jonathan placed a hand gently on my shoulder. There's more. I looked toward the photo albums. The first one was labeled Daniel, H1. I opened it. Inside were photographs I had never seen before. My father feeding me birthday cake, teaching me to walk, holding me while I slept, lifting me onto his shoulders at the zoo. Every picture showed a smiling father. Not the cold man I remembered. A happy father. A proud father. I turned page after page. Hundreds of photographs. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every school play. He had been there. Even when I couldn't remember him smiling, someone had been taking pictures of him doing exactly that. Then I noticed something strange. Almost every photograph had tiny fold marks, as though someone had looked at them hundreds of times. Jonathan quietly said, "Your father came here every year." I think these albums were the only place he allowed himself to remember the son he wanted to be. My heart shattered. How many nights had he sat alone in this storage unit, looking through these pictures, wondering if he'd spent another year punishing an innocent child? Then I opened the second box. Inside was every report card I'd ever received, every Little League certificate, my college acceptance letter, the newspaper clipping from the state science fair I'd won when I was 12. I froze. Dad kept this. Jonathan smiled sadly. He kept everything. I remembered the day I'd run into the house with that trophy. He had barely looked at it. Or so I thought. Apparently, after I went to bed, he quietly saved the newspaper article. Beneath the papers lay something wrapped in blue cloth. I carefully unfolded it. It was a small wooden airplane. One wing had been repaired with glue. Suddenly, a forgotten memory returned. When I was 7, my father and I had built that airplane together in the garage. I'd accidentally dropped it. It broke. I cried for hours. The next morning it had mysteriously been repaired. Mom told me she'd fixed it. But now, holding it in my hands, I realized she'd lied to protect him. Dad had repaired it. He just never admitted it. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed outside the storage unit. Jonathan looked toward the door. Someone was running. Fast. A shadow appeared in the entrance. Then a familiar voice shouted, "Don't read the last file." I turned instantly. Standing in the doorway, his face pale with panic, was Michael, and in his trembling hand, he was holding a lighter. For a split second no one moved. Michael stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, the lighter shaking in his hand. His eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with fear. Real fear. He looked past me and straight at the final black file lying on the wooden table. "Daniel," he said, "don't open it." I slowly stood up. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Because if you do, everything is over." Jonathan quietly stepped between us. "Michael, put the lighter down." Michael laughed nervously. "You don't understand. If he reads that file, our family is finished." I looked at him in disbelief. Our family ended the day Dad called me a disgrace. No, Michael whispered. It ended long before that. I picked up the black file. It was heavier than the others. Across the front, in my father's handwriting, were 5 simple words. The truth no one knows. My heart pounded. Michael took another step forward. "I'm begging you. Please. For once in your life, Just leave it alone. I looked him straight in the eyes. For once in my life, I'm done living with lies. I opened the file. Inside was a handwritten journal. Dozens of pages. The first entry was dated nearly 30 years earlier. It read, "If you're reading this, then I have either found the courage to tell the truth, or I've run out of time." I turned the page. My father's words became more painful with every sentence. I blamed Daniel for something he never did. Every time I looked at him, I saw my own doubts instead of my own son. The greatest failure of my life wasn't believing a lie. It was choosing my pride over my child. My vision blurred. I had waited my entire life to hear those words. Now they were written in my father's own hand. Several pages later, another document slipped onto the floor. Jonathan picked it up. It was a signed statement. Not from the nurse. From my father. He had rewritten his will. Completely. The new will left equal shares of the estate to Michael and me. But there was something even more surprising. The family house, the place where I'd grown up, had been left entirely to me. Attached to the document was a handwritten note. "This house belongs to the son who filled it with kindness when everyone else walked away." Tears rolled down my face. I didn't care about the house. I cared that, at last, my father had seen me. Michael slowly sank into the rocking chair. He covered his face with both hands. "I never wanted this." I looked at him. "Then why?" His shoulders shook. "Because Dad never looked at me the way he looked at you." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He praised me. "He bought me cars. He paid my debts. But he never trusted me." Michael looked up, his eyes red. "When Mom got sick, he watched you take care of her every single day. After she died." He started saying something he'd never said before. I swallowed. "What?" he said. "Daniel became the man I always hoped one of my sons would become." The words hit Michael harder than they hit me. I was jealous. "So when I realized Dad wanted to find you, I kept telling him you didn't care. I hid your letters. I told relatives not to give him your address. I convinced myself I was protecting what was mine." He lowered his head. "But all I really protected was my own selfishness." The storage unit fell silent. For the first time in years, Michael wasn't pretending. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming anyone else. He was simply telling the truth. Jonathan quietly spoke. "Your father knows." Michael looked up. "What?" He discovered everything before he disappeared. The nurse's confession. The hospital records. The hidden letters. Even the fact that you kept Daniel away. Michael closed his eyes. "I know." "You know?" He confronted me. 3 nights earlier. The same night Mrs. Patterson had heard them arguing. He told me. "Money can be replaced. Trust cannot." Michael wiped away a tear. Then he walked out. I haven't seen him since. Just then, Jonathan's phone rang. He answered immediately. After a few seconds he smiled. "I understand. We'll be there." He ended the call and looked at me. "They found him." My heart stopped. "Where?" "St. Mary's Hospital. He collapsed yesterday. But he's awake. And he wants to see you." 30 minutes later, I walked into a quiet hospital room. The machines beeped softly. My father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Older. Fragile. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he slowly reached for my hand. His grip was weak. "I'm sorry." 2 simple words. Words I had dreamed of hearing since I was a little boy. He struggled to continue. "I stole 30 years from us. I believed strangers instead of my own heart. I punished an innocent son." His voice broke. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at the man who had caused me so much pain. The man I had spent years trying to understand. The man who had finally found the courage to face the truth. I thought about Mom. About her final advice. Don't let bitterness become your home. I squeezed his hand. "I'm not forgiving you because the past didn't hurt. I'm forgiving you because I don't want the pain to decide the rest of my life." He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks. For the first time, I saw peace on my father's face. My father passed away peacefully 3 weeks later. At his funeral, there were no dramatic speeches, no arguments over money, only quiet reflection. Michael walked over to me afterward. "I know I don't deserve another chance." I nodded. "Probably not." He looked down. "But people can change." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then spend the rest of your life proving it." That was all I said. Because forgiveness opens the door, but trust has to walk through it on its own. A few months later, I moved back into the old family house. Not because it was valuable, because it was finally filled with truth instead of silence. I repaired Mom's garden. I hung childhood photographs on the walls, even the ones from the storage unit. And every now and then, I take out that little wooden airplane, the one my father secretly repaired all those years ago. It reminds me that love can exist, even when fear keeps it hidden. But hidden love still leaves scars. If my story teaches anything, it's this. Never wait decades to tell the people you love how much they matter. Pride can steal years. Silence can destroy families. But truth, even when it arrives late, still has the power to set hearts free. Thank you for listening to my story. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Silent Regret Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people we love most. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's finally hearing the truth.